Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of Real Parables. I'm Devin here with Graham. And if you've never listened to the podcast before, what we try to do here at Real Parables is we like to watch movies. Me and Graham, it's one of our favorite hobbies is sitting down and watching a movie. And today we watched Chippendale Rescue Rangers. And basically what we do is we watch these movies, and as we're watching them, being the ministerial brains that we have, we like to make parables out of them and make lessons out of them, because we kind of feel like that's what Jesus would do if he was alive today. Because Jesus, he used his parables to help teach lessons that were really going over everyone's heads. The Pharisees had all this power of just telling people anything and they'd believe it. And Jesus really broke it down into simple stories, and that's kind of what we like to do with movies. Is we take these nice, easy stories that directors have given us and turn them into Christian lessons.
Some of them are easier than others.
Yeah, that's our goal. With some movies like, what was that Clint Eastwood movie we watched?
Oh, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That was a hard one.
Yeah, that was kind of like one big point that kind of ran through the whole thing. Instead of a bunch of, separate little lessons, it was like one long lesson. But it was still good.
Yeah.
I think we got quite a few people that watched that one, wasn't there? Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most famous movies of all time. So that probably helped. But like I said, today we watched Chippendale's Rescue Rangers. Now, maybe you are old like me and you remember the actual TV show that was out in the late 80s, early 90s that was about these characters. But this movie, it kind of picks up after that show. Well, kind of. Chip and Dale, they are living in a world where humans and cartoons of varying styles all kind of coexist in a modern day Hollywood, Los Angeles kind of thing. But their lives are a lot different than they were. In Chippendales, the TV show, they're all buddy-buddy, but this time things are just different. And when this former castmate, Monterey Jack, he disappears, Chippendale, they have to do some pretty hard work to repair a broken relationship so that they can save their friend that they feel somewhat responsible for. So let's just dig into this movie and we'll kind of move along through this. Once again, spoiler warnings. I mean, This is a pretty new movie on Disney Plus. It's a pretty fun movie.
Yeah.
It's if you're my age or maybe a little bit younger, there'll probably be a lot of like little inside jokes that you'll pick up on. It was definitely meant for somebody of my age to really get into because you watched it and it was like,
it was okay. I really liked there's a lot of cameos in it that I did relate with, which were really funny.
Yes.
It was cool seeing a lot of the Roger Rabbit characters in there.
My favorite one is Paula Abdul and Tomcat.
Oh yeah, Paula Abdul in there for like just literally a split second. It's like, why was she there?
Yeah. So,
but yeah, it was cool seeing a lot of cameos in it. I think it would appeal more towards Graham's people.
And I think little kids would like this
kids
movie.
will love it.
They're just not going to get all the little inside jokes and stuff. Anyway, so the movie starts actually before Chippendale's Rescue Rangers TV show. When they're kids, Dale is the new kid at school, and like anyone who's at a new school, the first thing they want to do is kind of one or two things. Either they just want to blend in and hope that nobody notices them as being new, and they just kind of become a familiar face kind of on the down low. Or there's the other side of that where they just want to jump in and they want to make friends. But that can be so awkward sometimes. That's what we see happen in this. But after a joke, that that he told kind of backfires, he all of a sudden becomes that weird kid in class that nobody really wants to be around. When you've gone to several schools in your lifetime.
Yeah,
You moved around a lot.
I moved around a lot.
So, what kind of kid were you? You know, when you went to this new school where you don't really know anybody, what kind of kid were you in that situation?
Honestly, I feel like I was a lot like Dale because I I initially wanted to like make a lot of friends, and then realizing how awkward I was like, well, I'm just gonna kind of lay low,
Yeah.
and just try to relax and be
Yeah.
cool, you know.
I was definitely the lay low kind of person. I mean, we didn't move around a ton. I mean, when I was a little kid, you know, like uh, around, I think kindergarten, no, I think it was first grade. You know, we moved a little bit then, but then I was in North Carolina. So, I mean, it was a small town, so I kind of grew up with people, but still, I just kind of like to blend in and eventually become part of the school environment. I mean, how has this strategy played out though as an adult? You know, like when you're entering into, you know, what it might not be school, maybe a work environment or something like that,
I think
or just a community.
it it doesn't work great.
Yeah.
As an adult, I think because I'm more introverted, it was hard to be extroverted. But as an adult, I've learned to be more extroverted and get out of my shell. And I found that people are just a lot more friendly than I really think they are at first. So really, just talking to people is just easier. And I think the more people that you talk to when you get to a new job or really any new place, the more people that can actually get to know you and see who you are.
Yeah, I'm a lot less shy than I was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was super shy.
Same. I was like, I
So-
just didn't want to talk to anybody.
So
My parents had to condition me by when we go to like Taco Bell or McDonald's. They're like, "You're ordering the food today. You have to walk up and talk to them, and you order the food." As like a 6-year-old, I'm like,
that's good.
I'm terrified.
That's good though.
But it honestly that did help me.
It kind of snaps you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was petrified as a kid. I mean, all the way into like middle school, I was petrified about talking to people in general. You know, it didn't matter who they were. So how is your modus operandi when it comes to these kind of situations? How do you think that affects?
It's a big word.
Mode of operation. How does that affect your evangelism? You know, because I mean that's really what evangelism. You know, evangelism is about making friends. You know, so how does your style of making friends affect evangelism in general?
It's like directly because I typically what I tend to do is when I'm reaching out to people trying to make more friends, I automatically kind of evangelize incognito. Like I don't even realize I'm doing it, which is I think good. But I also don't want to. I don't want to like go hardcore like come to church with me this week.
Yeah.
You need to be saved now.
Yeah.
Like I really just want to get to know people, and then it's cool when they want to get to know me better, which involves wanting to know more about my faith.
Yeah, I still find myself trying to sneak in under the radar. You know, I'm not trying to be deceptive or anything like that. But I, you know, just try to make myself a part of people's everyday lives, and then over time, you know, you get to have those, like I said, opportunities where you do get to share, you know, pieces of your faith. You might not do I don't really do like the traditional, let's go out to lunch and let me lay out all the points of salvation for you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't do that. But I make my faith clear. I'm willing to answer questions, and then I'm willing to talk about real stuff. And I think that's what, you know, my evangelism style is really affected by, is I just want to be real with people. I don't want it to be, you know, some half. You know, I was at lunch the other day, and clearly there was a minister who was having lunch with a prospective believer, and he was doing the, you know, comparative religions
whole
stuff.
Presentation.
Yeah, comparative religion stuff, and I'm just like kind of halfway listening in, and I'm just, if that works for you, good on you. But it's just not me. I feel so uncomfortable because it's not natural to me.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes with your personality. But anyways, so after kind of this, after all this happens, Chip, I end up befriending Dale at lunch in the cafeteria when nobody else wants to sit with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of see this whole homage to their early friendship and kind of 80s pop culture,
Yeah.
especially 80s Disney pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then you finally see them kind of at the wrap party for season 3 of Rescue Rangers. And in this moment, we see that Dale has become, or at least he believes that he has become, the second banana, which is what we would say like the second fiddle.
Yeah.
He's become the second banana on the show. He's the one that is kind of the brunt of the punchline of the joke, and he begins to see himself as kind of the dumb one. And he might not actually think that he's dumb, but he believes that everybody else thinks he is the dumb one. Mm-hmm. So he starts to pull away, and he finds himself in this situation where he decides, well, I'm going to start my solo career.
Yeah.
But he does this without thinking about the other people on this show.
Yeah.
And, in doing that, he probably broke some contracts, with the Rescue Rangers people. And the show got canceled. And, in the process, there's a lot of bad stuff that happens they don't go into great detail about the timeline of how quickly all their relationships were ruined, but they clearly had some tough times.
I feel very reminiscent of like the Muppets movie, like falling out type of thing.
Have you ever found yourself in that kind of place though? I mean, and if you have, how did you handle it?
Yeah, I kind of feel like you get a sense of that when you have some big life changes. Like you have a group of people that you're really closely tied to, and that you do a lot of things together. You might rely on each other for kind of just having that person you talk to or something, and then you or the other person has to move because of a job change or something. And so I feel like lots of times, like moving to Michigan or moving from Michigan back here, or leaving one job to go to another one, I always feel like there's kind of like this fallout that happens like emotionally, of leaving people that you kind of leaned on and they leaned on you.
Yeah. I think being the quiet kid, growing up, I felt like this a lot, that I was always kind of in the back.
Yeah.
And nobody really noticed me, and that's mostly because I wasn't ever talking, so, when you go to the sleepover with your friends, and everybody's trading baseball cards, I was always the last one to speak up. And so I never really got the best of the trades.
Yeah.
And, when we're playing, G.I. Joes, I never got to be any of the cool people. I got to be like the lame people because I never really, stood up for myself. And, there was definitely some hurt feelings there. That feeling that you're not respected, or that you are held in less high regard, is kind of a funky feeling to have. So I can kind of sympathize with where Dale finds himself in this point, where he just wants to be recognized. He wants to be his own person. He doesn't want to be the second banana, but he handles it in totally the wrong way, because he's in that moment, he's only thinking about himself. And, if Chip was such a good friend and these other characters were such good friends, then he should have been able to be open and honest with them about it and say, hey, I don't really like these jokes. And I would imagine after 3 seasons of a pretty popular show, you could say, I don't really want to have any of these jokes at my expense anymore, because they're kind of hurtful. And as friends, they should have been able to have that conversation. But sometimes, maybe we're not willing to be vulnerable enough, to have those kind of talks with our friends. or maybe our friends aren't willing to be vulnerable enough to have those kind of talks with us.
Yeah. Which is a shame.
It is, but I think that there is a lot of damage that's done to relationships because of ego. And I was trying to find a good Bible passage, that kind of that talks about this. And I'm sure there are some out there, but none of them that are like short.
Yeah.
But there's several cases. Case of David, case of Peter, even the case of Paul. You can look those up on yourself, where there's a lot of ego that gets in the way of relationships, and it's just dangerous. When we allow these very, very human feelings to interrupt what it was created by God, which is friendship. So anyways, Dale's decision to have, what was his name? Double O Dale?
Double O Dale.
Double O Dale. So it was a chipmunk that was supposed to be a spy.
James Bond.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
I wonder
if the pilot actually does exist, because that'd be funny if that's like an actual thing.
It would be super interesting. I don't know that it does, but maybe it does.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Dale, because he decides to go solo, gets the show canceled and ultimately, messed up their friendship and their careers. And it's always out of this time of selfishness and, because of our perceptions, they get in the way, and, they're just a dangerous place to be in. And I was thinking specifically just now about the story of Paul and John Mark. I think that's probably the best illustration from the Bible. Mm-hmm. Clearly John Mark had messed up. He was in the middle of, he had committed to being a part of this missionary journey. He had committed to being, with Paul and Barnabas, and then he chickens out and he goes home. Yeah. Or he gets homesick or whatever it is. So, but Paul kind of holds this grudge. He just refuses to let that go, and it ends up ruining his relationship to some degree with Barnabas.
Yeah.
Because Barnabas believes that John Mark is now ready during this time for the second journey. He believes John Mark is ready, and he's committed to him, but Paul doesn't want anything to do with it. So, these two ministry partners have to go separate ways because of these very human emotions. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was for the best in some regards, or maybe God just had to use what our human weaknesses were giving him in that moment, but it's still kind of sad.
Yeah, I feel like a big theme that maybe we don't hit a lot because of the movies we do, because I feel like anytime there's kind of drama happening in a movie, the biggest way to solve that is just communication, which is just a huge issue, which is an issue happening there in Scripture. There's a huge lack of communication, and in this story, huge lack of communication, because in reality, Dale doesn't want to do the show. He doesn't want to do the 007 show. He just wants to feel like he's needed. He wants to make this leap to like, hey, I really want to do this other thing, to see if anybody else is like, hey, but we would really miss you. Yeah. And nobody really does that for him, so he just assumes the worst instead of confirming the worst, which is that nobody does need him. But the reality is that Chip needs him very badly. Mm-hmm. So it's just it sucks that I always feel like that's happening in drama movies, which I know we don't watch very often, and I don't think we've ever really done a episode on. And we can do one on Mean Girls if everybody wants us to, but I don't
know that we've ever done like a true chick flick.
Yeah, but I feel like, man, just communication.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I've learned a lot too, being married, is, man, communication. That fixes a lot of things.
It's like, you want to be able to do this, hit pause.
Yeah.
And take a time out and let's talk about this.
Yeah, let's lay it all down.
Before you go your opposite ways, and it takes 40 years to fix this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it right now.
Exactly.
You know, it doesn't take somebody dying of cancer to bring you back together. Yeah, you can have all that time.
Yeah, so don't jump to conclusions. Get to know somebody, understand why they're doing the things they're doing before you assume the worst of them.
Yeah, and then next time we see these two, you know, they aren't real exact with time, but if it's real time, you know, so that happened in I think 1990 is when that show was, you know, season 3 was supposed to be wrapping, and if this is supposed to be, you know, 22, you know, so you're talking, you know, on coming up on 30 years or more of since all this happened. I don't think chipmunks actually live that long, but they are cartoons.
Yeah, their cartoons just live forever. I mean, you saw Roger Rabbit there.
Yeah, but Peter Pan aged.
That's badly.
Yeah,
very badly.
But anyways, so a good chunk of this movie, you know, is trying to fix that 30 years of brokenness. Mm-hmm. You know, they have not talked, at least we don't think they've talked, at least not very much. They have not really interacted. They've not taken the time to do anything. So most of the movie is spent trying to fix that. You know, Chip was really hurt by Dale's betrayal. You know, that's what he says he feels. He felt like he was betrayed, and he harbored a lot of ill feelings towards him for a number of years. But to fix the friendship, it's going to take a lot of hard work, and not just from Dale, but also from Chip. I mean, in your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges to fixing a relationship that is severely broken? You know, not just like you had a fight, but something that's really, really broken. And, you know, what's the most important thing to kind of keep in mind?
That's a big question. I think one very important thing is humility. Mm-hmm. Because in the moment, you can feel pretty high and mighty on yourself, being like, man, they really messed up. But yeah, it's in those moments, it's easy to forget like how screwed up you are yourself.
I played a part in this too.
Yeah. And even if you didn't play a part in it, I'm sure you've played a part in other mistakes with other people. Like everybody messes up, everybody screws up, and I think that's one thing you got to realize is you ain't perfect.
Nope.
So why are you acting like you are? Mm-hmm. So what was the second part of that question?
This all kind of one thing. What's the most important thing to keep in mind?
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges, and what's the most important thing to keep in mind?
I think one of the biggest challenges is just being able to find a time and space to break things down. Mm-hmm. Like finding a place to really mediate can be difficult sometimes. It could be sometimes just not having a space and the time to do that just is the whole reason why you don't do it. That can just squander an opportunity.
Yeah, I was really trying to think about this, you know, as I was watching the movie. I actually had to pause it because I wanted to kind of unwrap and this isn't everything. This is just kind of some broad strokes. But number one is be willing to be the person to make the first move. Mm-hmm. You know, that's one of the biggest problems that I see in my past relationships, in my kids' relationships. Yeah. You know, we have a situation with my son and another young man. You know, just you got to be the first to make the move, to start that process. Jesus says in Matthew 5, if you enter a place of worship and about to make an offering, you suddenly remember that you have a grudge against a friend, or a friend has a grudge against you, abandon the offering. Leave immediately. Go to this friend and make things right. Then and only then come back and work things out. You know, so that willingness to just drop everything and fix this. You know, so often we don't focus enough on the importance of this relationship needs to be fixed now. Mm-hmm. It's more important than anything else that we do. And from what Jesus is telling us, fixing a broken relationship with your brother or your sister or somebody in the church, that is more important than any other aspect of your time in church together. Mm-hmm. It's more important than singing. It's more important than praying. It's more important than giving your offering. All the other stuff's important.
Yeah.
But you can't properly do those things until you fix that relationship, because your heart isn't going to be in the right place. If you keep looking across, the building and seeing somebody's face that you're mad at, and you're sitting there steaming, right?
Yeah.
When you're singing that song, you're not really singing that song with the right heart. Or when you're praying, you're not praying with the right attitude. So, according to what we see here, is the first thing that we have to do is make sure the relationship is right. And we have to be willing to make the first move to fix that. Another thing is, like you said, we have to acknowledge our own wrongs.
Yeah.
Because even if it was somebody else who has hurt us and that was their wrong, maybe our wrong is that we've held on to that hurt and that pain and that unforgiveness for too long.
Yeah.
First John tells us that if we claim we are free of sin, we're only fooling ourselves, because we all have a wrong in this thing. And then another thing, do all you can to live in peace. So we find from Paul in Romans, chapter 12, is that we have to do everything we possibly can to live in peace with people. We can't let this underlying stuff just sit there and bubble and rumble around. And then fourth, be humble.
Mm-hmm.
Be humble enough to make things work out. James tells us, and he gives grace generously, as the scriptures say. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves before God and resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And there's more out there. That's not the entirety of the things that you need to do, but those are some good broad strokes when you're talking about fixing a broken relationship. And, Chip and Dale, they have a pretty severely broken relationship. I mean, there's a lot of bitterness on both sides. Another big theme in this movie is redemption. You have Dale, he wants to redeem himself to Chip. He feels bad for what he did all those years ago. He wants to make things right, but he just doesn't know how to do it. He wants to be redeemed. There's a police officer in this movie. Her name's Ellie, and she wants redemption because there was a false report that was filed about Nickelodeon Studios, and she went in, and that's kind of pretty funny.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
But so she goes into the Nickelodeon Studios, and some stuff happens, and she wants some redemption. She wants to be respected as a police officer again. Even Chip. Even though he's the one that feels like he is the wronged one in this situation, he still wants to redeem himself because he has held that grudge for so long. It sounds like, that Dale through the years had tried making contact with him, but because Chip was holding on to this pain, it was unsuccessful, and eventually Dale just gave up. What would your advice be to someone who is seeking redemption from a worldly perspective? Not necessarily like the spiritual, godly perspective. That's a different conversation for a different day, but just redemption in this world.
I think just proving yourself worthy of that redemption, like just showing some morality. Because I think if you mess up pretty bad, you can talk the talk saying I've changed, but you got to walk the walk. I think when you walk the walk and show people how you've changed from a worldly perspective, like saying if you've been a thief your entire life and stealing things, the biggest way you can really redeem yourself is by changing your ways. Not only by like not stealing, but maybe you give back to your community. I think that is some redemption that you can see worldly, but I also does some spiritual redemption too. Like it just happens if you're working on becoming a better person.
Yeah. when it comes to the spiritual redemption, I mean, outside of believing and following Christ, it's something that's easily and freely given.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the world doesn't give it
No.
as easily. I just, as you were talking, I was reminded of that famous line from Saving Private Ryan, where everything is going wrong, and this whole platoon of people have I don't know if it's a full platoon. Platoon's a big group, but this group of special forces people are going in to save Ryan, and everything just goes wrong.
Yeah.
And Tom Hanks' character looks at him and says, "Earn this."
Yeah.
Which is connected to this idea of redemption. That we have to, like you said, sometimes just be able to prove that we're in a place where we can fix this. We can. We're not the same old person we were.
Yeah.
For Dale, he would have to prove, I'm not the same old selfish guy. I've grown past that. I'm ready to work on. We don't have to get the Rescue Rangers back together, but I want the friendship back.
Yeah, I want that relationship.
Yeah. So after Chip and Dale help, the police track down Stinky Pete. What did you think of Stinky Pete?
Well, so hearing the name Stinky Pete, I assumed it was going to be like the old character Pete that's in the old Disney cartoons. Was very surprised to see it was a middle-aged Peter Pan, which was something. It was the smoker's voice that really got me.
And what did you think about what it meant to bootleg somebody? I mean, I was thinking about, as they were explaining what bootlegging was in this movie.
It was human trafficking, honestly. That's the best way you could describe it, is a cartoon kid way of describing human trafficking.
But it was, like, if this movie is meant for kids, that was terrifying.
Yeah.
So Stinky Pete would send his guys out, when if they were owed him money, he would send his guys out to kidnap them, and then they would erase their mouths, and so they couldn't talk or scream, and then he would come back and surgically remove other features from these,
redesign them to
look but not exactly
so they couldn't get copyrighted.
Yeah, to make bootleg movies for other markets. And that whole idea was just...
It's straight up slavery.
It is. Yeah. That's a very serious... I mean, Disney went hardcore into that bad guy.
They really did.
But in that, when they track him down, and in that moment, they say, when they're trying to figure this, they've just had this moment of victory, right? They've just beaten Stinky Pete. They say
Sweet Pete? Huh? Sweet, or is it Stinky?
I think it's Stinky. Maybe it's Sweet. I might be wrong. I can't remember.
Sweet Pete.
He just looked like he was something that would stink.
Yeah, which is funny how like the stinky cheese in this movie is like a drug for
for Monterey Jack.
You've been eating the stinky cheese.
But I can't. Was it Chip or was it Dale that said, "We're always better together"?
As Chip had said it.
Yeah, Chip.
Which is cool hearing Chip say it, because he's the one that really is the one holding this like grudge.
Yeah, grudge. So he says, after all this kind of wraps up, he says, "We were always better together." This is so many times the most unfortunate part of our lives together. We think that we'd just be better off on our own.
Yeah.
I talked about, the other day in our Wednesday night devotional that, I had this dream as a kid that I would get to be Grizzly Adams, that weird old dude that lives up on the mountain and his best friend is a bear. That was my childhood dream, because I didn't really want to have to be around other people. And a lot of times, we just think that we're going to be better off on our own, but we're not. We're never better off on our own. We're always better, and we're far more effective when we're able to work together. Can you think of a time where you tried to do something on your own and then, you had this moment of realization that I need help?
Yeah. I happened a lot like when I was first starting like my first couple of jobs, and in my head I'm like I should just be able to do this by myself and know what I'm doing and be good at this because I don't want to show weakness and
Yeah.
lose my job. But in reality, what my bosses want me to do is to ask for help so I could learn how to do it the right way and be more productive later. But in my head, I couldn't get past. I was like, no, they don't want me to ask for help. They just want me to do the job. I mean, there might be some bosses like that, and I have had some bosses like that. But more often, it's people are willing to help. They just don't know you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My natural inclination is to always just do it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So it's working with others it's one of the more difficult things for me because I'm very particular. I have a way that I want things done. And I think to myself, well, I could spend 45 minutes explaining what I want done the way I want it done, and then still not do it the way I want it done and have to fix it. Or I could just do it myself and get it over with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not always true. It doesn't always work out that way. And then it's leaving a huge part of life missing, because in that time where we're working together, there's other things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's the other part of what we talk about here. There's the relationship that's building. There's the camaraderie that happens. And, if Graham is only doing things Graham's way, then that's a pretty one-sided way of doing things. When you add other people in, like my wife Brianna, it takes on a whole different flavor because, I am my perspective is, you do A, B, C, D, then you're done. Her perspective is, well, yeah, A, B, C, D are fine, but what about all the subpoints? And what if there's a point over here that we haven't even thought about? And then you come back and it's a much more beautiful thing. Like when we were working on the presentation we were doing some stuff with some training with Kairos, and they had us present, this theoretical church plant to them.
Yeah.
And, had I presented Graham's thing, it would have been much more boring and not nearly as well rounded if it didn't have the influence of 5 very different people involved. So, just because we think we're better on our own, we're not ever really better on our own. And then in this, so the police are able to track down, this smuggling operation, but Stinky Pete or Sweet Pete or whatever his name is, he gets away. And then a little bit later, through some police work and some cooperative, they end up coming in contact with, Pete again. Mm-hmm. And Chip says this: "We all have hopes and dreams, but the world has a tendency to break our hearts and smash those dreams to bit." That's what he says to Peter Pan, who's threatening to erase him. And then he says, "But it doesn't have to be this way. You can choose to be better. You can choose to overcome what the world throws at you and be a better version of you." And that's possibly one of the most godly things I've ever heard in a Disney movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's lots of times where God pops up in Disney and Pixar and all these other things, but that sounds like something that could be straight out of the Bible.
Yeah.
Maybe a Message translation of it, but still, it is such a biblical statement. Just because the world says this is who you are, because the world says this is who you've become, or this is all that you'll ever amount to, doesn't mean that it has to be that way. Mm-hmm. You get to choose to be a better version of you. And that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, the only part they're missing is the Jesus part. You know, that Jesus is the one that makes us the better version of who we are. You know, just because the world says Graham is this thing, Jesus says, no, you're not. You're going to be this. And it's an incredible thing. And then one more thing, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I just had one more point. One quote that kind of is said a lot in this movie is, the biggest risk is not making any risk at all. It's something that Dale says when he's trying to make this new TV show, and it's something that you find out that Chip's mom has said to him growing up. And I think the biggest thing to take away from that, the biggest risk is not making any risk at all, is that when you don't go for it, like, you're not going to get anything back. Like, if you, it reminds me a lot of Jesus' parable of the talents. Like, go ahead and squander it, but take a risk. Like, take some kind of risk. And I think basically the way we apply that today is not just with the ABBA song, but is with our faith. Like, go for it with your faith. Go ahead and tell somebody about your faith. You don't have to preach at them, but share that you're a Christian. Let people know. Find some way to get out of your comfort zone, because the devil wants you in that comfort zone. He wants you to feel safe and secure. But in reality, you need to jump out of that, because then you get to see some growth happen for you and the people that you reach out to.
St. Francis of Assisi once said, preach the gospel everywhere you go. When necessary, use words. You know, there's a whole bunch of ways that we can share the gospel with people.
Yeah.
But the most effective one is by the way you live your life. And but in that, we also have to take that chance to share our faith in one way or another. We have to, you know, if you are preaching the gospel by just the way you live your life, then you have to be willing to live that life in the presence of other people. You know, you can't hide yourself away in your house. I mean, it's pretty easy to be good when you're at home all alone. Not for everybody, but for the most part. But you have to take that risk to be that messenger for God. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You know, somebody says, "Yeah, I don't really believe that." I mean,
that's okay.
There was somebody at the grocery store 2 or 3 days ago. He was wearing a shirt that said, if we work together, we can find a cure. And it says all these little things, you know, these little check boxes, help us find the cure for religion, you know. And I didn't know. I mean, he's just a stranger, and I was standing in line at the grocery store. I was like, "Hey, tell me about your shirt. You know, what does that mean to you?" And, you know, he kind of talked a little bit about how he thinks that religion is the reason for most of the world's problems. I'm like, well, I get what you're saying, but true religion, you know, true faith doesn't have anything to do with that. True faith has everything to do, and it doesn't matter what religion you're talking about, you know, but true faith is trying to make you a better person. Doesn't matter which version of faith you're talking about, that is the ultimate goal, is to be a better you. And it's like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. I was like, unfortunately, you know, we corrupt things and mess things up. But the ultimate goal is to be a better person. So
humans are good at corrupting things.
Yeah. But, you know, I took a chance. I talked to somebody. And, I mean, is he going to come to church tomorrow? Probably not. Not tomorrow, but whenever Sunday is for you. Is he going to come to church on Sunday? Probably not. But will he think a little bit differently? Maybe. But at least he has that thought in his head. Yeah. And that's what really matters. That's a starting point. That's all God needs to start.
Just a little mustard seed.
Yeah. That's all it takes. And then, you know, kind of as we're wrapping up, at the very end of this movie, you know, Pete has fallen into his own transformation machine, and he's no longer, you know, Peter Pan in the middle-aged body. He is this part kitty cat, part Transformer,
Wreck-It Ralph.
Wreck-It Ralph. You know, he's just this.
And he has Woody's leg.
Yeah, he's just this weird conglomeration of all kinds of stuff. And he's, you know, Chip and Dale are having this this battle with him out on the pier, and you know they end up winning the fight by reenacting a scene from the season finale of the season finale of number 3 for Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers TV show by dropping this big crate of stuff from above. But as the police are trying to arrest, you know, this new iteration of Pete, he kind of breaks free in that typical TV thing and fires a shot. That this shot will kill Chip. But Dale sees what's happening and jumps out and sacrifices himself for his friend. And that's what I want us to end on today. We don't need to talk about it in any detail, but the Bible is pretty clear. Jesus is pretty clear that there is no greater love than your willingness to die for somebody else, to die for a friend. And that's what we see happening here. And it's kind of a cool image that that he put his life on the line to save his friend. And that's a pretty cool image to come from a Disney movie with a weird enemy that's shooting Mario.
Yeah, it's
which
Mario
isn't
Bullet.
Which that's not Disney. I mean, the amount of copyright stuff that they got worked into this movie is pretty impressive.
They cashed out.
I'd imagine Mario is probably pretty expensive to get on your list of.
Post Malone did the cover.
Right?
I'm sure that's not cheap too. Maybe Post Malone was a big fan of Chip and Dale.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of Post Malone, so
yeah.
If he wants to come worship at church with us, he's welcome to lead.
Definitely, we'll have him up. All right. Well, we want to thank you for joining us as we talked about Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers. Next week, this is a movie that has been on our radar to talk about since we started this.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
And it's a movie that I've never seen. Now,
it's a shame.
Reason I've never seen this is because it's one of those movies you have to like pay attention to. And I have a pretty chaotic household, so it's hard to pay attention to some movies, certain kinds of movies. But we're gonna do it this coming week. We're gonna watch and talk about Interstellar.
You Matthew McConaughey fan?
I am. I think he's very underrated. You know, there's a lot of people who give him a hard time, but I think he's a great actor.
So those Lincoln and Wild Turkey commercials people give him a hard time about.
Yeah, well, and it was the first 10 years of his career was doing rom-coms, you know, that kind of shot him in the foot.
There's some good ones, though.
I think some of those are my favorite comedies.
We might have to do one of those.
Yeah. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days is a great movie.
Oh, great movie.
Great movie. But we hope that you join us next week as we talk about Interstellar. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about with that. There's usually a lot of depth in his movies.
Yeah.
So I look forward to it. But until then, we'll see you then.
Have a good one.
That was a weird sign out. Until then, we'll see you then.
Until then?
That doesn't make any sense. We'll see you soon.